Yo,
So,
welcome to another episode of my Summer Lair Space Station Oddity. And my name is Sammy Yunan, and I'm hanging out with.
James Bond obsessor Stephanie Cole.
All right. That's a very reserved introduction today. Usually you have a lot more elaborate, like award winning and.
Well, I mean, right now all I care about is James Bond. So,
Okay.
me and my roommate are doing a rewatch of all the movies, and I'm just like, uh, I'm seeing it Thursday night. I'm seeing No Time to Die Thursday night, and I'm kind of looking at it. Craig's last outing the same way I'm approaching it the same way I approached Endgame. Like I'm really excited to see it, and I have no desire to see it whatsoever because once I've seen it, that's it, done.
Yeah.
So, but I'm slightly reserved today. I ran my last long race today before my marathon next week, and so it was 10 miles, and that sticks with you for the rest of the day. So
I could imagine. When you say you're watching all of the movies, are you watching like all of the Daniel Craig movies or all the Bond movies?
yeah. No, we're doing Daniel Craig's because I specifically want to watch the Daniel Craig saga. That's what we want to do. We're watching them in prep for that. And my roommate, I know he'd seen Skyfall, and I think he'd seen Casino Royale. He hadn't seen Quantum of Solace, and I can't remember if he's seen Spectre. So he's catching up on a movie he hasn't seen. So last night was Quantum of Rider Strike, and tonight is Skyfall, and then tomorrow will be Spectre.
So it's interesting when you're saying your roommate hasn't. There's a couple that he may not have seen, like Spectre or whatever it is, but like the way that they're kind of, especially the last two trailers or so for No Time to Die, it almost looks like they've kind of hammered out a loose continuity between the Daniel Craig movies, almost like a Marvel movie.
Yeah, there has been, and I've found that interesting because there are actually still some Bond movies from all the past ones that I haven't seen, but I know that the kind of continuity that's going on here really wasn't. It was almost serialized to a point.
Yeah, which is unusual for a Bond movie, as you said.
So I mean, well, if I remember correctly, the books were not. The books were more serialized as well. I mean, I think the only movie that hadn't been made from Ian Fleming's original work was Casino Royale, except for some. I think before Sean Connery, there was a TV adaptation.
Yeah.
Made, and so that was the last one. That was the last Ian Fleming. So I mean, yeah, it was uncharted territory with Pierce Brosnan but they were going off of the books that were written, the actual official books that were written after Ian Fleming died. This was pretty much just all, they're I don't want to say making it up as they go along because that sounds like flying by the seat of their pants, but that's kind of
Star Wars.
So, but I think that's also kind of awarded them the ability to, like you said, like it is Daniel Craig's saga. Like it's his story. It's like it arches across all of it. So even when there's a gap of time, a big gap of time between movies, like, and I don't just mean the real world, I mean in like the Bond world, like the gap of time between Quantum of Solace and Skyfall. He's clearly a more seasoned agent at that point. And what his adventures were, in that time we don't know, but he's definitely been on some adventures enough that when he goes over the edge at the beginning of the movie, he's just like, I'm fucking done. I'm done. I'm so done. I'm done with all of this until, MI6 goes boom. So, obviously there was a lot that happened in there, and so even though the storyline, it was an overarching storyline between Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall was a totally separate story, but they still managed to actually link them together even while bringing in new characters. Like finally bringing in Moneypenny, bringing in a new Q, saying goodbye to Judy. still can't get over that one. But bringing in a new M as well. So yeah, it's you're right. It's like there's continuity across it, which makes me especially excited to see this one, to see how they finished telling that story. Because you had it like when I was mentioning earlier on Endgame, like you kind of had. I mean, we didn't know what was going to happen, but you knew the snap was going to be undone somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you kind of knew some stuff going into it.
It's called Endgame.
This is yeah. So exactly, I'm like, and this it's like I got nothing. I have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I know that he gets in his Aston Martin and does again what Q told him not to do, which was bring it back in one piece, not bring back one piece. And he still brings back one piece because he destroys that car.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's somewhere in the beginning.
Yeah.
So I'm just really excited to see where this goes.
So
really excited to see where it goes.
We gotta, before we figure out where it goes, we gotta go back in the past, because what's framing our discussion today is it's being James Bond. It's a 45-minute special. It was released early in September on Apple TV in America. It'll be there till October 7, and it was released on Crave in Canada from September 24 until October 24. And basically the 45-minute documentary special, being James Bond, just kind of looks back at Daniel Craig's James Bond era, or as you call it, the Craig saga, which again reinforces this idea of a continuity or a run-through that kind of goes through all the Bond movies, which typically in the past, the movies were more or less like had a very loose continuity. Obviously, all the actors were the same. Q was consistent in all the movies, but for the most part, the James Bond movies were kind of operated like the Simpsons episodes. Lisa's always a vegetarian in all the episodes, but there is also, each Simpsons episode is just kind of like a mini universe. A bunch of stuff happens, and it doesn't necessarily relate to the next episode.
Yeah. I'm trying to think which ones I still haven't seen.
So Craig is the 25th movie. The No Time to Die is the 25th movie. So
it is. So he did 21 through 25.
Right.
So yeah, it's funny because I'm sitting here going like, which ones have I not seen yet? And it's because there's no story that I need to connect between these movies. So it's like skipping around, never, it's like, this is not the kind of thing that you could skip around on this series. And it's fascinating because I watched, the documentary being James Bond. And when I was watching it, I was going back to the beginning, and I'd forgotten completely that they had called him James Blonde or the Blonde Bond.
Yeah.
And like all of that stuff, and how everybody was like, Daniel what? Daniel who?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody in England was pissed that he'd been cast.
Yeah. And
I remember being kind of indifferent because at that point I wasn't a fan. I mean, I wasn't not a fan. I was very indifferent towards the Bond movies. And I had seen, as much as I love the movie now, GoldenEye is such a ridiculous film. I think that's why I love it, because it is so ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
But I was pretty indifferent towards the movies. They weren't my cup of tea. And this is the moment where I pull my girl card out. I will freely admit the moment that I became interested in seeing it was the moment they got that pap shot of Daniel Craig walking out of the water.
Yeah.
And it was funny because they talked about that in the documentary, about how like that's what changed everybody's mind, because I was a fan of Daniel Craig. Like, I'd seen some of his work. I'd seen Layer Cake a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I loved Layer Cake. But I remember kind of thinking the same thing. I'm like, he's such a skinny dude. And any skinny dude can turn into a buff guy if you try hard enough.
But it was also just the whole like, there's like, but all of them up till then were kind of like tall, dark hair, I guess classically handsome. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure
James Bond is the reason the phrase tall, dark, and handsome exists.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. That's probably what it contributed. You can probably like chalk that influence up. So it was like, some of the criticism in terms of that was legitimate just because it was such a radical departure, right? It was just not what people were expecting because of the template, like especially because like we done about 20 movies this way, right? This is like, it's always the thing of like when you go to McDonald's like in Texas and they have a slightly different item on the menu, or they put pickles on something and you're like, yo, we don't do this here in like New York or other places. And so it throws you for a loop because you don't know how to react to this like weirder menu item or whatever this is. Like it's McDonald's, it still feels the same as James Bond, but at the same time there's some noticeable differences. It's not quite the same McDonald's that you know.
Um, I was worried they're fighting. I was getting some weird feedback. I don't know if you could hear, but I was getting weird feedback on my end anyways before it
No.
glitched, and that's just technology for you,
Okay.
you know, as per yesterday's shining
Oh
example.
yes.
Um, yeah. Um, uh, where do we leave off? We were
I was
talking
saying that
about,
like some of the criticism for Daniel Craig was
oh
understandable
yeah,
because it's a lot like going to different McDonald's, right? Like if you go to McDonald's in Texas, they have
yeah,
different items on the menu. It's not what you usually
mm-hmm,
expect. It's still McDonald's and it's still James Bond and he's still a tool of the British government and all these things.
mm-hmm,
But there's some noticeable differences that kind of threw people off.
mm-hmm,
And I think that's where like
yeah,
I can understand where some of the criticism was coming from because I was very critical too because I was like, I don't know, that dude seems a little short for Bond.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's funny because I was, I feel like this was kind of, in the documentary, which for any of you out there listening, I was like, it's actually really short. It's like 45 minutes long. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. For, kind of confirmed to me, is that in the documentary, I was like, but I thought this a little bit when the movie originally came out, and I was definitely feeling this when I watched it, it was a couple days ago. Is that it was the perfect opportunity to reboot Bond in a way that made more sense for what a spy would like, what a spy would be like today, what they would look like today, like how they would, what James Bond should be in today's society. Even if even with the movie coming out 15 years ago, I'm like, it's still, and the Nokia bricks they had in the film, but it's like he was grittier, and you like in today's society, most, I don't think most spies are going to go around looking like, Pierce Brosnan.
Mm-hmm.
And, maybe you can get away with that to an extent, but the whole point of being a spy is being able to blend in and get information. And, for, the US government or king and country or whatever, like casting Jeffrey Wright as Alex Leiter.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Oh,
blanking
Felix
for a
Leiter,
second. I
yeah,
love him,
the
and I'm blanking on
CIA
my.
agent, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's like, and he's so generic,
Mm-hmm.
and it works, especially especially when you see him. He's actually a really really good example, because in Casino Royale, he could put on a tux and he absolutely looks like he could belong at that table. Like he's not noticeable, but he can pull off looking like he belongs at a high stakes poker game. And in the next movie, when we see him in Quantum of Solace, he's like in some backwater hole in a third world country, and he can actually hold himself with the locals way more than Bond can.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a modern spy would be. And so I think giving Bond a grittier edge makes it more believable and makes it still interesting for a modern society. And I felt like that was confirmed a little bit in the film. I mean, in the documentary, because they were talking about wanting to. They did want to reboot it, and they wanted to make it something fresh and something different and something that was still going to hold people's interest. And when Miss Broccoli was talking about when she saw. I'm blanking on what movie she was watching, but the moment she saw
Oh
Craig
yeah,
and
I can't
realized
remember
that
what.
he would
Yeah,
be.
he
You
was
remember?
walking in
Yeah,
the
you remember?
hallway.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
it was just, which one?
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but it was the scene where he's walking in the
Yeah.
hallway. That's what she clued in.
Yeah. And when they showed that, I was like, oh yeah, I could see it. I could absolutely see what she saw.
Mm-hmm.
And it was but it was that walk, which Daniel Craig has done a very good job of making that Bond's walk, and it works. But it was sinister. Like, he looked sinister. You know, he didn't look like, you know, he looked like he was going in there, you know, to kill your whole crew. He did not look like, you know, like he was gonna go in, you know, and seduce your whole crew instead. So, which is part of the reason I, you know, talking about the movies in general, the whole opening sequence of the very, very, very first Bond movie, I mean, of Casino Royale, how it was all in black and white right up until he makes his second kill. And then it goes into the opening. Like, this is before and this is after. This is before he becomes 007. And it really told you, like, this is not, even though it's serialized, this is not a continuation of everything you've seen before. Like, this is new. We're going back to the beginning, and we're going to start this over. We're going to adapt Bond in an entirely different way. And I feel like they made him more vulnerable, which you see more of in the books, but you don't in the movies. Even back when they were making Ian Fleming's novels, you do see him as a bit more vulnerable, a bit more gritty. You know, he is. You know, he's not just he's not just gonna. Yeah.
But that brings up,
really doesn't care when his Bond girl gets killed.
Right. But that brings up an interesting point, because we see this with the Marvel movies as well. Where, like, and they emphasize this in the special, being James Bond, but they wanted somebody who could actually act. They wanted to get a really good actor. And I find that kind of strange, because the Bond movies, it's not that they're terrible actors or anything like this. Like, Sean Connery does great for what he does and who he is. And you can see other movies like Crimson Tide and things like that. The Rock, he's perfect for those roles. He does what he's supposed to do. Indiana Jones, perfect for what he does. But it's weird now that, like, we've kind of reached this evolution where, like, as I said, the Marvel movies have a lot of Academy Award winner or Academy nominated actors. Like, Robert Downey Jr. is a good actor. Scarlett Johansson, good actor. Mark Ruffalo, good actor. And it's like, but you don't really necessarily need quote unquote good actors, or do you, for these type of roles? You're just playing the Hulk. Just go smash stuff. You're playing James Bond. Just go smash stuff on behest of the British government and then go home. Like, do you feel like we need to have these good actors or these good performances?
You know, I do. And it's because I feel like we've gotten to a tipping point in society where, you know, like, I feel like we've seen it all in film and television and music, like all of it. You know, it's everybody bitches about stuff getting recycled or rebooted and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like you can't get away with just going Hulk smash. You have to actually put some depth behind the character itself, not just the persona, but the actual character, the actual person, because you need to make your audience care about them. You need to make the audience care about the person from one movie to the next. And if you put an actor in there who has gravitas and who can actually make the role his own, you want to know what happens in the next one. You want to, Robert Downey Jr., I mean, granted, like, he was Tony Stark, but you cared what happened from Iron Man 1 to Iron Man 2, like from Avengers to Iron Man, what happened the Captain America. I want to see what.
Can you repeat the last couple lines, because you cut out?
Oh yeah. No, I'm just saying that, like, for me as an example, as much as I wanted to know what was going on with the Marvel movies and what was happening with all the characters from movie to movies, as someone who's been obsessed with Captain America for years, one of the more sticking points for me is I wanted to know what happened to Steve Rogers. I wanted to know what happened to Bucky Barnes. Like, I want to know what happened to these guys from one movie to the next. That was important to me. And so, and it's like, even though, mentioning Bucky Barnes, even though as far as we know, we don't know what he's going to come back. We know he signed for something, but we don't know for what. We believe we've seen the last of Steve Rogers. You're still going to have a lot of people that wanted to go watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier because I wanted to know what happened to Bucky Barnes. And then because Sam Wilson was part of that whole crew, I now have deep love for Sam Wilson, and same with Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, because they were all this team. And you get out, like what you're talking about, you get the Scarlett Johanssons and you get the Ruffalos and you get the up and comers, who are making names for themselves as, having a talent outside of just being able to play a comic book character.
Tom Holland.
Yeah, they're infusing a person into the persona, and it makes you care about it. And that was the thing with me. I loved Casino Royale. I loved the movie as a standalone movie. I didn't see Quantum of Solace until after Skyfall came out.
Mm-hmm.
And Skyfall was, as much as you cared about the character in Casino Royale was interesting. And I don't know if anybody's noticed this, or you may have noticed. I'm like, it actually felt like it was shot to have that cinematic feel of a spy film. A lot of the shots were done that way. A lot of the cinematography was done that way. It was lit that way.
Mm-hmm.
Quantum of Solace wasn't, but it was really when Skyfall came out and you saw the toll that something like this job could take could have on a person. Bond might be, to be a 007 agent, you need to be some level of a sociopath, but that doesn't mean that you are a pure 100% sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time where you looked at him and went, this dude needs a hug.
Yeah.
The guy needs a hug. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I need to know all of this. I want to go back, rewatch Casino Royale. I need to see Quantum of Solace. I want to see what the whole lead up is to this, and watch Skyfall again. And then, sure enough, when Spectre was going to come out, I wanted to know what happened to him after he lost M, after he had to deal with, a new Q, a new, or a Moneypenny coming in, a new M coming in, and MI6 getting blown up, and all of those things that happened in that movie, him having to go back to his childhood home. That was huge. They took that destroyed one of the theories that had been going on for years, that Bond was just the name. James Bond was a code name, because that was the Bond home. His parents' names were, his last name was Bond.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to know, and you can't do that unless you've got somebody, behind the character. It's like, I think a good example is Lou Ferrigno. Love the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Love him to death. But the thing is like, you think of him and not Lou Ferrigno. He was just the Hulk. I actually cannot remember right now who played Bruce Banner.
Bill Bixby.
It wasn't the same person.
Bill Bixby.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Think back to that TV show. Tell me anything you remember about Bruce Banner, and then tell me what you remember about the Hulk. You just they didn't and that was a TV series. They didn't infuse, even though it was a whole TV series, they didn't infuse that kind of gravitas behind it. They did it with the movies, and it worked. They're still turning them out, and people are still showing up.
But it's weird, though, because the counterpoint to what you're saying is that Bond didn't really necessarily have these emotions or this range of acting or vulnerability or depth or anything like that for 20 movies, basically 20 movies. And it was a successful franchise. It still resonated and still connected with the audiences. So that, I guess what I'm asking then is, do you think then the audiences have changed or they've evolved?
Well, I don't want to, I think I kind of want to backpedal a little bit. I want to say that there was no range. Sean Connery was like you said, I'm like you mentioned, Crimson Tide, and then Hunter Red October. He did a lot of great movies.
Mm-hmm.
Pierce Brosnan. Funny enough, actually, when you said Crimson Tide, all of a sudden I was like, is that a Brosnan movie? And then I was thinking of Crimson Peak.
Okay, yeah.
But he did the Thomas Crown Affair and all kinds of, these actors, Roger Moore, they have some legitimate credits under their belt. So they I don't want to say they infused these guys didn't infuse a person into the persona.
Mm-hmm.
They infused a personality into the persona. That's very important.
Yeah.
Because, that was actually one of the sticking points, in the documentary, they were talking about how Craig just came across monosyllabic, bland, prickly at that first press conference, and the big bland Bond thing was, and that's, because it was the charisma, and you cannot do that without that kind of charismatic personality. And I think that, that is, Bond always got the girl.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's a lot of dudes out there who are probably, girls maybe too. Like, well, not necessarily, because it seems like most of the Bond girls end up dying.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, hey, you don't have to worry about sticking around because they're not going to stick around.
Yeah. It makes it
But
easier
they
to
got
break up.
the girl, and they got the car, and they got the gadgets, and it's, and then you get that personality to go with it. It was an emulation of Bond, but this time it's like people were emulating James Bond, but now with Craig, you're starting to care about the actual person James Bond, which is why I know a lot of people, myself included, can't imagine having another Bond after this. Not saying that it's not possible. I'm not saying that you can't keep it going. I absolutely believe that you can. It's just impossible to imagine. Whereas before, yeah, you can imagine another Bond coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like, where do you go from here when someone just literally made these 5 movies his, like I mentioned, a saga?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean
So I don't think audiences changed. I think that's just shifted.
that was the issue too. Like you mentioned, like the vulnerability with Bond, with Craig's Bond, and that was one of the things I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of turned me off a little bit because I don't like him to. I don't like James Bond. As you said, he's kind of like this. He's a walking tuxedo of gadgets
Mm-hmm.
and seduces women, and he has the interplay with the bad guy and the cool dialogue and all that stuff. It just didn't seem like that kind of vulnerability, that kind of openness, that kind of I guess really it's kind of like bravado. That's really what it is. Bond has a lot of bravado, and so
Mm-hmm.
to do the opposite, I was kind of a little bit put off by it because he should be tougher, he should be stronger, and he should also, like you said, be a high functioning sociopath, right? Like Bond is basically dead
Mm-hmm.
inside. He's just a tool of the British government. So whenever there's a nail that
Mm-hmm.
they see, they just basically use him as a hammer and just kind of like nail it down. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like I struggled a little bit, and I still do with Craig's kind of vulnerability and his emotions.
It's funny you make that analogy of a hammer and a nail. Like his job is just, he's the hammer. It's just his job, to put the nail
Mm-hmm.
in. But in this case, with Bond having more depth to him, more complexity to him, I think is part of what, in a reality sense, would make Bond survive. So in your analogy, yeah, a hammer and a nail will get the job done, but a nail gun, which is much more complex and much harder to deal with, is going to do a more efficient job.
Mm-hmm.
You need that, to be a spy. Now, if you're just an assassin, that's one thing. If
Yeah.
you're just a straight assassin, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But 00 agents are not assassins. They're spies with a license to kill.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact, so they have to be able to blend into a crowd. They have to be actors to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you're not going to get that unless you have someone who can think around a complex set of emotions. It makes me think of, I was a big fan. I think we've talked about this before on this. We have actually, talked about this on this show before. I'm a huge fan of Buffy, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the reigning theories, and not so much theory. I mean, it's kind of been mentioned in the series itself, is that the reason that she was one of the longest surviving slayers and considered the best slayer in the entire lineage is because of how she wasn't just a blunt instrument. And in season 2, the first time we see a new Slayer, that girl is a blunt instrument, and Buffy basically goes in there and forces her to get mad, and tells her, is like, you feel that anger, you feel that fire, use it,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that having the complexity, you're going to believe him more you're going to believe him when he's being a spy. Like if you're on the other end of it, if you're the guy at the other side on the other side of the table, you're going to believe that he belongs at that table. You're going to believe that he, wherever he shows up. So I don't know. Well, let me ask you a question. What was the first Bond movie you saw? Do you remember?
It's too. I couldn't tell you the first one just because I watched them religiously growing up, so they're all like one
Hmm.
big blob of Bondness. Like I know like now as
Yeah.
an older person, I know the difference between like Sean Connery and Roger Moore and stuff. But as a kid,
Yeah.
it was just one big blobness of like action and vehicles and women and like surviving with his wits and all that kind of cool
Hmm.
lines and things like that. Um, and that's funny too because it's like that's one of the things I kind of like. What makes me a little bit sad with the Craig Bonds is not that it's Craig's fault in any way, shape, or form, but we had all the TBS marathons and all these kind of things on cable where you constantly could find like a Bond movie playing late at night or anytime. And so you would stumble upon stuff. And so I would watch chunks of Bonds for 20, 30 minutes, then go on my way or take a nap or whatever it is that you don't really kind of have anymore. And so all those things, all the Bond stuff kind of got reinforced because of those TBS marathons and that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I basically started, but from to kind of sort of answer your um your question, I started seeing Bond movies in the theater, like physically putting on pants and going to see Bond movies around Timothy Dalton. So
Okay.
Timothy Dalton,
Um.
Pierce Brosnan, and obviously Daniel Craig's. Those are the
So, did you have like of your first 20? I mean, I know you mentioned that you said they were all just kind of like a blob, like blended together. But did you have was there any one in there in particular that you tended to gravitate towards, like a favorite or anything?
oh yeah, uh, Goldfinger, the man with the golden gun, like all that.
Hmm.
Moonraker, I just thought was so ridiculous and over the top with the space stuff. Doctor No,
Hmm.
the original, was like a classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was definitely a few. I think really it kind of boils down to like one or two from each actor. That's like, oh, that was delightful.
Well, and then there's just the one where you can only actually like the one.
Oh, George Lazenby, yeah, that one was a weird one too. It took a little while for
Oh,
me to kind of
George.
like get used to it, just because he was married, and it just seemed again that too kind of seemed disconcerting. It seemed out of place for Bond to get married or to be like quote unquote retired or whatever. And so I know this sounds cold out loud, but when they like killed the wife and they kind of freed him up, I'm like, okay, Bond's back to normal. I understand how that sounds out loud, but that
Well,
is just
that's in the books.
yeah, I know, but
I
again, it's just the way
Okay.
that the Bond's kind of been presented to us. So it just
Yeah.
doesn't like we. It's because it's also an action movie cliche, right? I want to do one last job and then I'm out, right? I'm not gonna do any more killing. I'm not gonna do any of
Yeah.
this. Like we've seen that kind of cliche, and like again, because I view Bond as like a tool of the British government. I'm like, you don't. That Hammer doesn't just say like I don't want to build houses anymore. I'm gonna retire. Hammers don't retire,
Mhm.
right? And then in Bond's
Yeah.
case, I think he would either like obviously die or he would just like
Hmm.
just be incapacitated somehow, like handicapped or whatever.
Well, he actually makes Craig's Bond actually says a line not too far off from how you're like in the first movie, because when he's made double O, it's when I'm pretty sure what is he says it when he breaks into M's house the first time in Casino Royale, and she's like, I'm wondering if they made a mistake with you, and he's like, well, from what I understand, a double O, double O life expectancy is short lived. So, it'll be a short lived, it'll be a
Mm-hmm.
short lived, it'll be a short lived mistake.
Yeah,
So, like, they're not expected to survive,
yeah.
you know?
Octopussy had like
So,
008 die. He got a knife to the back. So you've seen like in other movies, other Bonds
yeah.
who you're like, who's that guy? That's like 008, and then all of a sudden he's gone. I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have to know who he is then, right? So you keep moving on, right? And that again
Yeah,
was
but come
always
on, admit
the
it. You remember 006. Uh-huh. Alec,
oh yeah, okay,
Sean Bean.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
there you go,
Okay. There's no forgetting that one.
yeah, yeah.
But I also I have a deep, 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 deep love for Sean Bean,
Mm-hmm.
especially because of his name. So, but that's a story for another day.
Correct.
Um.
But it's interesting
So yeah.
before you circle back to your point though, I want to bring up one other point too from the documentary, which was that like um they initially were going to cast original people, like the classic type of Bond that I was talking about, which is like the names they
Mm-hmm.
had listed at the time was Colin Farrell, Hugh Jackman, and Clive Owen.
Mm-hmm.
Clive Owen's been kind of rumored for a
Yeah.
Bond for like years. I think
Mm-hmm.
ever since like maybe like Timothy Dalton, like it's been around for a while. Um,
Yeah.
so it was interesting, like those none of those names particularly work well. Or I think if they had hired them, they wouldn't have been. You wouldn't have gotten obviously the Craig saga in terms of this like continuity and this kind of vulnerability. It would have been more of what in line of what I was thinking or how I perceive Bond.
And that's fair. And I like that point because I feel like, you know, I mean, we would not. Skyfall isn't just a great Bond movie.
It's a
It's
good
a
movie.
stellar movie.
Yeah.
You know, you could switch out everything about that being James Bond and just make it somebody else, and it still would be a
Hmm.
stellar movie.
Yeah.
And it's like you just said, it's like if we didn't have Daniel Craig, we would not have Skyfall. You know, we wouldn't have that stuff. And I feel like, you know, you mentioned Moonraker as being so over the top ridiculous, which yes, but a lot of Pierce Brosnan's films in general, it's like I was telling her, it's like mentioning Goldman. Like that movie's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I cannot. I still can't get over Denise Richards, Christmas Jones, and she's a doctor. I
Oh
can't get
yeah.
over it. I will never get over that. That sends me. I swear to God.
She was a nuclear
Um.
physicist, wasn't she? I think it was.
Oh yeah, she was literally a rocket scientist.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but the thing is like you can only sustain that for so long, and it's just so I don't think that I think that if they kept that going, it would have just people would go see a Bond movie because it's James Bond, but it would gotten to the point, and it was getting to the point where it's like you went and saw it because you just felt like you had to as a rote at that point.
Hmm.
Not to discount the movies. I mean, like Pierce Brosnan was great, but at the same time, it's like you just went. It's like Doctor Who. You watch it because it's Doctor Who,
Hmm.
not necessarily because you like the current Doctor or anything like that. But it's like it's like you've been doing it. It's like it's like you're excited for the new Doctor, whatever. It's like, but it just becomes rote at a point. And I feel like if they hadn't gone with Craig, then I don't think they would have re-energized it the way that they did.
So,
So
but that
I'm
brings up an interesting point
yeah,
because the tension with all of these things, with Doctor Who, with James Bond, with Avengers, all of these things, is that there is an ongoing tension between the new fans because you have to bring in new people as well. These things like we're
yeah.
celebrating Wonder Woman's 80th anniversary, right? Like Wonder Woman doesn't last 80 years if people don't like her. Like generation after generation of people don't like her, right? So
Yeah.
how do you resolve the tension between the new getting new fans and pulling in new like the getting the kids, right? You got to get the kids smoking
Mm-hmm.
or and like versus the old heads. Like people like me who have like happily enjoyed like 20 years of Bond being dead inside, no emotions, completely
Mm-hmm.
misogynistic. You know what I mean? And then now like you said cuz you're in the same boat now because once the Craig movies wrap up, you're in the same boat now. Where like if the new Bond comes out and it's not quite what you want or whatever, there's gonna be tension.
I get that. And I'm thinking about the Craig movies. I mean, like he did become dead inside by Skyfall. Like
Hmm.
he was absolutely dead inside. And that all was because of just how fucked up Vesper made him.
Yeah.
Just completely screwed him up. Um, it's almost like he went into being a double O agent, all bright eyed, bushy tailed, only to find that go, no, 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 it doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
So I feel like you got a combination though when you think about it, at least to an extent. Um, you got the gadgets, you got the girls, you
Hmm.
got the. He was just. I mean, that was kind of the running joke in more so a little bit because it was both of them, Casino Royale um and Quantum of Solace, where M kept going, okay, but did you leave him alive because we wanted to question him? Don't worry about that. let's focus on future things, because he killed the guy. He kept killing the people that they wanted to question, and did a lot more in Quantum of Solace, and to the point where they, and this is one of the plot holes that drives me crazy because they never wrapped this up, when he ended up throwing that guy off a roof, and then it was oh gosh, I can't even my god, I'm blanking on his name right now, just because, anyways, I'll get to that in a second. The main villain of the movie,
Christopher
he
Waltz?
fell on his car.
Oh,
No, this isn't Quantum of Solace.
Quantum Solace. Oh.
So I'm just blanking on the dude's name right now. Uh the character's name. But anyways, he falls in his car, and he's like, he see my face, and so the driver gets out and shoots him. Well, M thinks that Bond shot the guy and threw him off the roof, and it turns out that he was Special Branch.
Mm-hmm.
You killed a friendly, and you did it in cold blood. And that's when they're like, you need to come in,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, we're gonna put you down. And he's like, no, it just came to a head. So it's like, you got the random killings, you got the Bond, like I said, the Bond girls and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, for all of us women out there, all us modern women, we got Bond Boy when he was coming out of the water. Which apparently, I was reading a funny story about that, which I was hoping they would talk about in the documentary, but I get why they didn't. But when he pops out of the water like that and walks up, the entire reason that shot exists is because all he was supposed to do was swim across the water, just keep swimming. It was going to be a shot where him swimming from one end to the other, but he ran into a sandbar, so there was nowhere for him to go.
Oh.
Daniel Craig. So that's how they ended up so when he pops out of the water and starts walking to shore, they put that in there because that sandbar was in the way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the shot. That was the pap shot. I'm like, that was the turning point. It was serendipitous.
Mm-hmm.
So we got that. Us girls, we got to see the pretty. That's which we didn't always necessarily get with the other Bonds.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like what you're talking about, where it's like, how do you bring in the old and the new? I was like, I feel like you kind of got a little bit of both, especially in Casino Royale. I was like, it was, like I said, it was shot like a Bond movie, and he was being very just killing it, like it almost felt like at random, like just anybody and everybody. And you got the absolute beautiful girls top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
But you got, for the newer generations, the ones who wanted a bit more realism in their movies, which I think is actually a product of the 90s, because there were so many reality-based films, not like reality TV, but I'm thinking of things like the whole reality bites era of films.
Okay.
That we expect a little bit more realism in our movies, especially also with the advent of CGI and how far it's come along. We really expect to see some more. We don't want it to look fake, and we don't want it to feel fake. So you get that with Bond being a little bit grittier, a little bit this, a little bit that. Him turning into Bond by the end of the film, which is why he doesn't ever say the line until the very last shot of the film. I'm Bond, James Bond. Name's Bond, James Bond. He's wearing, he can't say it before that because he's not wearing the suit. He hasn't become James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually makes me wonder, because your point, I wonder how much of it would have been more, a little bit more Flash, a little bit more James, because they set the end of that movie up for him to become the Savile Row tailored suit James Bond. But we didn't happen in Quantum of Solace, which makes me wonder, or didn't really happen that much in Quantum of Solace, which makes me wonder, would we have seen more of it if there hadn't been a writer's strike?
Yeah, I didn't like Quantum of Solace at all. That one
No.
was like, I mean, I'm not that necessarily you need numbers for this, but it's one that generally a lot of people I know also don't like at all. I think it.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things where, like you said, they seem to have started something, and this little documentary short too, being James Bond, kind of supports this idea that they clearly want to start something, like kind of similar to like the way that Nolan had his Batman trilogy, and he started with obviously Batman Begins, and so Casino Royale was basically James Bond Begins, but Quantum Solace, whether it's the writer's strike or whether it was other issues, didn't just quite it was half baked, right? They pulled it out of the oven way too soon, before the cake was ready, and so it's kind of like a disappointing meal. And I think they worked, and I think that's partly why they worked hard on Skyfall. They're like, look, we're sorry about the whole Quantum of Solace. Here, we'll make a really good movie to make up for that.
I don't know if you heard me say it earlier, but for years I've always called it Quantum of Writer Strike.
Yeah,
That's what I call it.
It was just like, that probably contributed to it, but also I think it's just like they also just I think what you're saying too, and what this little documentary is supporting too, is I think they were kind of on they didn't quite know how to do this. Like when the Marvel movie started, Kevin Feige had he had a clear vision of this is what we're gonna do, and they put the little end credits in there, and they knew how to keep building the story. I think Casino Royale, I think they did really want to do like some sort of Marvel MCU type continuity, but they didn't know how to do it. They did it the Star Wars way. And I think that's also partly why Quantum of Solace suffered, because it was like, well, we got to put all these things in there to like make sure that it fits and continues the story, but they didn't really know how to do it, so they just kind of just that's basically it.
Well, this is where I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, only because of the fact that Iron Man came out in 2008. Quantum of Solace also came out in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't have the Marvel map yet.
Mm-hmm.
No one did.
Right.
And sometimes I've actually wondered if it was like the other way around. After after they saw what you could do with a character like James Bond, with this character that is burned into people's brains being a certain way, how you could infuse it and give it life. I wonder if that was part of a kicking off point of like, we can do that with these comic book characters. Everybody knows Iron Man. We can breathe life into it. Mm-hmm. We can breathe life into Captain America, who in the comics, even has always been seen as a stick in the mud, and was for most of the beginning of the first film until he, it didn't really change much until the end of the film. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder if actually what you're saying is actually the other way around. Not so much that they were trying to do what Marvel was doing, but Marvel went in and said, we could do that with these characters. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I wasn't in the room. Yeah. But I would absolutely 100% believe it if anybody, Feige or any of them came out and said, oh yeah. We that was part of what made us think that we could do this.
But we've seen like in like Fast and Furious has a very tight convoluted continuity in terms of like watching the movie order. But it has a continuity. The Saw movies is another one with a very distinct continuity that you kind of sign up for these things, right? And then kind of your point, which is that Quantum of Solace did come out in 2008 and Skyfall was 2012. So there was 4 years of seeing like Marvel movies and I guess Fast Furious and other things kind of establish a really distinct continuity that audiences gravitated towards and kind of signed up for. And the flip side of what you're saying too is like, I think even for general fans, like non-nerds, I think they're a little bit put off by the DC movies because they're like, do I watch Aquaman first or Justice League? And like, I've had those questions from non-nerds, right? Yeah. Because they got conditioned by Fast and Furious and by Marvel movies. They're like, do I watch this one first? Or I'm like, no, Aquaman is just a movie. You could just watch it anytime. There's a little bit of kind of connection to Justice League, but not really, right? Like, you don't need to watch Justice League to kind of get everything that's happening.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I 100% agree. But I think that, this just kind of popped into my head when we were talking. I actually think it goes back even further than that. I would say like the first movies that did it and probably turned the heads of, oh, we can suck these people in for movies upon movies, and instead of just waiting to see if the first one does well and then deciding to make a sequel, was Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Because that's Harry Potter. I mean, like, I think there is something to the Fast and Furious. No, actually, no, I'm not going to use that as an example because seriously, you can't watch them. There's a lot of the later ones you cannot watch them unless you've watched the earlier ones.
Han died.
Um, yeah.
So
So,
yeah.
but with Harry Potter and like in Bond, like there is a little bit to the movie, especially the earlier Harry Potter movies. You can watch them by themselves. There is a whole story there.
Hmm.
You really don't get that switch until Goblet of Fire. Because that's when what's his name? That's when Voldemort comes back. Because that's when it makes it really like an overarching story. But the thing is that I also think Harry Potter was the first one to take the last book and split it into two movies, and then Twilight did it, and Hunger Games did it. A lot of these they did that. They split the last one into two movies just to milk it for more because they knew people would. And they did it again with Marvel, even though it's not based on a book, it's based on comic books. They took what was essentially the last movie and made two movies out of it
Hmm.
because there was only supposed to be three Avengers films, and they made it four by taking the last one and making it two movies.
Hmm.
And because they realized, when they saw what was happening with Harry Potter, and then again, James Bond was doing it, and they started bringing him. They realized like we can keep, yeah, you've got people who would like to be able to just a movie comes on, you're right, late at night, and it's already 30 minutes into it, and you want to just be able to sit and watch it and not have to worry about what happened before this movie and what happens in the movie after. But you want that standalone, but at the same time it's like you know you're getting these people who you're building an audience that will it's a built-in audience for a movie. It's a built-in audience for a single character. It's a
Hmm.
built-in audience for a single movie that turns into one Iron Man turns into 20 something movies. And it's like with Craig, everybody was just breaking him over the coals when he was cast as Bond. And they managed to turn that one Bond film, this new Bond actor, into a whole series of films that had a built-in audience that wasn't just fans of James Bond,
Right.
but fans of Craig as James Bond and the story that was, like the story that was happening with him.
So
So
where do you go from here then? Like you kind of alluded to it a little
don't
bit, but like
tell.
because
I don't
you
want anybody.
but I'm talking more about like so then we saw that like a good example of what you're talking about is like the Nolan Batman movies, right? He did three of
Yeah,
them. They're all like one kind of contained universe, and then
yeah,
that's it. And then you watch Justice League and other DC movies, and you get different Batmans. There's the new Twilight Batman coming out, I think next year, right? So, but you can just watch the Nolan ones, and it's all contained. And so what you're
yeah,
saying is the same thing. The Daniel Craig ones are these five movies from Casino Royale to No Time to Die are all contained. So
yeah,
then you do the same thing with like so let's say you get a new, let's say Clive Owen or somebody's the new Bond.
yeah.
Do you do then like another like five again or another trilogy that kind of self-contains everything, or do you just go back to the way Bond was as like a loose Simpsons continuity
I'm
where
still worried about how they're going to make just the transition from just the first movie transition because it's like you can do it. It's like you're saying. It's like how do you do that? Because you can do it in so many ways. I'm like, I feel like you can't continue the James Bond story the way that it went because you can't continue to tell Daniel Craig's James Bond story
mhm.
with a different actor. So it's like, and then you have to ask yourself a whole host of other questions. Okay, so does that mean that we're going to get Ben Whishaw back as Q? Are we going to have the same Moneypenny and M? I mean, are we going to get Tanner? Is Tanner coming back? Are these people coming back for the next movie without Craig, or are they going to go, okay, we have to reboot everything again because his was so contained and its own story? Or do you
Which is what
find a
Batman
way
did.
to, yeah. So, or do you do like, or do you end up making it, well, I mean, we'll find out in this movie, but I mean, James, we found out in Skyfall the name James Bond is not a code name, but do they kind of embrace that mentality and go, you know what, we are going to turn it into a code name.
Hmm.
The world knows who James Bond is. He is famous in in the underworld, But that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody knows who he is. They know the name. That doesn't, they could embrace that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know though, because it's like your question was like, do they make it a whole contained story or do they go back to? I was like, I feel like that's the second question. The first one is like, how do you first make this transition?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but it is a good opportunity. I think having a blonde Bond, so
Mm-hmm.
to speak, that whole thing, giving Bond an entirely different look and it working really does open up the possibility of having a black Bond in Idris Elba. Although he said he's not doing it. Breaks my heart, but whatever. Having that kind of a Bond, or Ben Whishaw was saying in an interview recently that he could absolutely see there being a Bond that's gay. I mean, although it was already confirmed in Skyfall that whether Bond is bisexual or not, he has actually had bisexual encounters, which also should be common for a more modern spy,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to play to the room, whatever room you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this was like, you still have a dude, you still have a white dude. Let's change his hair color and see how it changes eye color. See how they loved it. Hey, we can't make it a girl, but maybe we'll make it and go from there. And like these baby steps until the Doctor Who, the first female Doctor Who,
Sorry, you're breaking up again.
connect in this Twitter space. It's usually me, and I
You're
I
breaking
don't
up
know
again.
if I just have an issue. I am.
Yeah.
I don't. So let me. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Now it sounds clear. Now it's good. Don't move.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. So you were saying like you think the audiences like should be like you play to the room. You were saying so you try and get like a blonde Bond and see if that works. If people accept that and keep going from there.
And these changes until you get to the point that you have a female Doctor Who. Maybe you'll have a female Bond. I mean, we do know because it's been in the trailer a lot that the next 007 is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Do you have in mind who you could see as the next James Bond?
No, but um, I know like Tom Hardy is one name that's been kind of circulated around a lot. And again, that's
favorite.
But his physical stature, kind of that short, stocky, kind of still fits with the Craig, right? Like, so we get the dark hair back, but we still got the physical stature, I guess, of Craig. So I don't know. I guess that could work. But he's also making a lot of Venoms now, so I don't know if he has time to make Bonds. Because the problem with Bonds is that it's very time consuming as well. So you need to kind of lock somebody up. I know Daniel Craig's made other movies, but for the most part, since 2006, and I know No Time to Die has been delayed quite a bit, but for the most part, since 2006 with Casino Royale, he's been more or less dedicated to the Bonds, right? It's very much like the Marvel movie actors, right? Like Robert Downey's made a couple of movies here and there, but for the most part, he's just been basically cranking out like 20 Avengers movies. But I don't mind totally Tom Hardy. I'd need to see a little bit more from him to like he looked good in Inception with the suit and everything like that. So I'm like, that's a possibility. But I can't think of anybody right now that I'm like, yeah, that guy's perfect. Like, let's hire him and like give him the job and like move on. And I think that's partly why they said they're gonna wait till like 2022 to decide who the next Bond is, because I think they just need some time.
The problem is you have to find an actor that is down to action, and I don't just mean as good in an action film. I mean you've got to be able to picture somebody beating the shit out of somebody until they're dead. And at the same time, they have to look damn good in a tux.
Right.
And so Hiddlesticks, that's what I call him, Tom Hiddleston.
Oh,
His
yeah,
name has been floated around. And it's like, so you take those two Toms, right? I can see Tom Hiddleston, carrying a room in a tux. I cannot see him beating the crap out of anybody.
No.
Tom Hardy is the other way around. Yeah, we've seen him dressed in a suit, but there's just something about his face that just screams like gritty, just just grittier than even Daniel Craig. And so I'm like, it's finding somebody who can be both. And then, oh my God, I know that part of his name is Renee and part of it is Jean, and I cannot think of the whole name right now, but the guy from Bridgerton.
I don't watch that. So
yeah, but
they don't make that for me.
Like, he is a very, 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 very pretty black man, and his name has been floated as a possibility. And I look at him, I'm like, I really don't know if I could see you beating the crap out of somebody. But he's also somebody that I look at him and go, like, I can't picture it at all with Tom Hiddleston. Cannot picture it.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I can maybe picture. It's like, if I saw him doing it, I could maybe see it as passing, but I'd have to see it first before I believe that he could play both sides of it. That's the issue. You have to find someone who can do both.
That's why it was kind of when you look at some of the older ones, like Pierce Brosnan had Remington Steele, so you got to see him in a tuxedo, you got to see him punching people, you got to see him doing kind of like spy, thriller, detective stuff. Roger Moore had The Saint, right? So again, you got to see him in kind of like action. So it's like those are like longer auditions in a way, where like it wasn't a stretch for those actors kind of jumping into that thing and for audiences to accept it. And I think that was also the problem too with Daniel Craig, was he kind of came out of nowhere. He hadn't really done anything that was super mainstream, that was like the audience kind of knew who he was and what to expect. Whereas like Tom Hardy, we've seen like Inception and Venom and a few other things. We're like, all right, that kind of works. And we've also seen what do you call them, Hiddlesticks, in like Avengers movies and other places. And like he's a good actor, but yeah, like you're right, like he looks like 120 pounds, like soaking wet. I could take him. So that one's not happening.
Thinking about this, especially because you brought it up with the Batman movies, Bruce Wayne's the same way. Bruce Wayne is and not Tony Stark per se, because Tony Stark's never really been the whole, like, he has to be debonair, and he's never been that way. But Bruce Wayne has. Bruce Wayne has to be somebody who can play debonair and somebody who can absolutely beat the crap out of somebody until they're bloody and dying. And it's just, it's just not, it's like we look at these people as Batman, and I mean, in today's society, I never, ever would have cast Michael Keaton as Batman, but his Batman was so very specific, and he did a good job. I mean, Affleck, I absolutely think pulls off both sides of it. I am going to have to see the movie because I cannot get behind the idea of Robert Pattinson as Batman.
It doesn't like,
so
that casting is way off. Like, and they tried to do, like you said, a grittier, darker, almost like a Mountain Dew type commercial Batman, where it's like, let's be edgy. And I'm like, no.
He looks like emo. He looks so emo. I'm like, he looks like he should be filling in for Gerard Way as the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, not actually putting on the bat suit and then putting on a tux at night.
Yeah.
Or both. So, and I know it's supposed to be more of a going back in another type of origin story like they did with the Nolan movies, but I don't know, like I said, I'll have to, I've promised myself that I will reserve judgment until I see it, but especially Affleck filled out the bat suit. Like, he looked imposing. He had that. And, I mean, we could go back and we could talk about George Clooney, and we could talk about Val Kilmer and what worked for them and what didn't work for them, obviously.
Nipples.
But if we're going to talk about modern ones, I mean, why I'm blanking. Help me, because I keep
Val
saying
Kilmer?
the Nolan movies. Huh?
Val Kilmer? Batman?
No. The Nolan
Christian
movies.
Bale.
Thank you, Christian Bale. Christian Bale did a pretty good job of filling out the bat suit and filling out Bruce Wayne. He was a figure, to be sure, but Affleck's Batman was imposing. And we all saw the first time he dated Jennifer Lopez, he absolutely can be clean cut to like within an inch of his life. So and I don't know if they're just like, we have to rail in a completely opposite direction, but you and I have talked about this so many times, like, Warner Brothers is just all over the map as far as how they're trying to put together their DC universe. So I don't know, but this whole conversation we talked about Casino Royale, we talked about Skyfall, we talked about Quantum of Solace. We have not at all talked about Spectre. Did you like Spectre?
Um, I think so. That's the honest answer. I have to see it again. It's one I've only seen once actually, which is odd for a Bond. I've seen almost all the Bonds like numerous times. Obviously except for
Yeah.
Quantum of Solace. Quantum of Solace, I went back to it one more time, so I've only done it twice, and I was like, yeah, this is a terrible movie. But Spectre, for some reason, just falls through the cracks. I keep forgetting about it, and I just never kind of get around back to it. Like, so, the answer is I think I like it. I had a good bad guy, all that kind of stuff. But I think too, Spectre's crime was that it came after Skyfall. So
Yeah.
it's the thing of like, the record company was all excited when Michael Jackson's Thriller sold like 30 million albums, and then Bad comes out and it only sells like 20 million, and they're like, that's it? And it was like kind of a letdown, right? And it was like, well, what did you expect was gonna happen? So, the long answer to your question is I think so. Do you like it?
I do, but I actually kind of feel like the same way you do. I mean, there are actually some things in that movie I do not like, and we're watching it tomorrow, and so I know that part two of this space station Oddity, which by the way, for everybody who's listening, I designed the artwork for it, and I gave it to Sammy the other day to see, and
Yes.
neither of us noticed that it's a Space Oddity and not Space Station Oddity.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. It was very good art though, so I approved and I signed off on it. I was more worried about spaces with an S, so I went minute.
I like that. It's like, is it Twitter Space or Twitter Spaces? But I mean, that's so funny. It's so funny. I never noticed that. And then this too, like the chat today, because I'm the one who scheduled it. I scheduled it as Space Oddity. I'm like, it was just this word station just like kind of blew out of my mind.
Okay.
But anyways, so I know that part two of the Space Station Oddity is, after the fact, after No Time to Die comes out. So you obviously have to see it before next Tuesday. I'm seeing it Thursday. I feel like there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that bugged me about Spectre. There's a lot I liked about it. There's a lot I liked about that movie. But there are some things that bugged me that I kind of don't want to touch on until after I've seen No Time to Die, because I really want to see how they resolve themselves. One of them in particular being his Bond girl. How they used the team in this in Spectre. They brought in Moneypenny and they brought in Q and Skyfall. Tanner was already there. They brought in a new M. So you have these characters, and at the end of the film, when he goes after C and like all that whole big climax scene, the way that they were using those characters, it felt like a teen buddy cop movie.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I feel like they went from the best example I've been able to think of since Spectre came out is the difference between Lethal Weapon 1 and Lethal Weapon 4. They're two completely different genre of movies, and yet apparently all in the same universe.
Yeah.
And so I do know somebody who's seen it. One of my best friends in England, she saw it yesterday. Yeah, she saw it yesterday, and I was throwing out the best dad jokes because she was in a group chat today, and she's like, "It is killing me that I can't talk about it," and I was like, "Boob, I'm sorry, but this is No Time to Die." I was very proud of myself. But she's like, I mean, she was just over the moon about it, and she loves movies. You can win her over fairly easily, but she is very, very, very critical of stuff like this, especially being from England. Like a lot of this. I mean, she's very critical of movies. She's a producer. She's actually won an Oscar, and so she's very, very, very particular about a lot of this stuff. And she just, apparently it really is killing her that she can't talk about it. And I told her, I was like, just wait until Thursday. We can talk about it. So I've heard, at least from one person, I never read critics' reviews ever, but at least from one person, 2 thumbs up. Fine holiday fun.
All right.
So
We can leave it there. And then we'll continue this discussion after we've both seen No Time to Die. But for now, the 45-minute documentary special is called Being James Bond. And again, it's on Apple TV. You have until October 7, which is only a couple more days, unless you're in Canada, and you can watch it on Crave, and you have until October 24. And of course, No Time to Die comes out on Friday, October 8th. So that's it.
nice.
We are agents going to be signing off. This is, I guess, our burn notice. Is that what it is? Can't remember my spy. Anyways, I am Sammy.
I am Agent 005 Stephanie.
All right, 005. All right, that's pretty classy. All right, thank you for hanging out, and we will be back next Tuesday at 4 p.m. with artwork that spells out the proper name of the show, which we will now notice. And this show is called My Summer Lair Space Station Oddity, in case you didn't know. And we will be talking about No Time to Die. Thanks for hanging out. Peace out.
Have a good one.